Good morning. NCLH, that's good for my, I was wondering why my CCL was up this morning. It's because Norwegian gapped up as well. CCJ, slight little gap up. Cigna, slight little gap up. MasterCard, Roblox was the big winner this morning. Massive move and already a huge uptrend too. New all-time high. Harley Davidson, poor Harley Davidson, man. Think local, be global. Pretty sure that's their slogan. No, I don't want to short something just because it's up too much. It would have to actually start to have, failed to follow through setup, kind of going intraday, and then, kind of like SoFi would have to act heavy and then continue to roll over. Failed to follow through setup, break VWAP, reject VWAP, continue to stay heavy, and then, I could add into something like that. But yeah, things that go up, sometimes they just keep going up, man. I don't want to get too cute with shorting stocks that are incredibly strong. It's a bad habit to form. How do I identify whether a trade is crowded or not? I don't identify individual names as crowded trades. If you use COT data, you can identify, through positioning whether the NASDAQ is crowded or the Russell is crowded or Bitcoin is crowded, crude oil, cattle, any commodity. And that's done through futures market positioning, COT data. What I mean by crowded is in terms of positioning. So it's good to remember that small and large speculators are the biggest losers in the market, right? It's like you've probably heard the adage, 90% of people fail at trading, which I believe is correct. Probably more, I would say. And what happens is you get a bunch of people on one side of the trade, and what will happen is you'll get a lot of people long a particular asset, and when they're too long that particular asset or too short that particular asset, the market does a great job, proving the majority wrong, right? It's in particular small and large speculators, and they're defined as small and large speculators. And, if you understand COT data, Jason Shapiro does a really great job teaching it. It's not something that everybody needs to know. I don't think that it's that important, but it does, help you kind of keep yourself on the right side of the trade when there is some news failure. So, but yeah, not something I would think about, honestly. Not something that everybody needs to think about. SE looking good. Yeah, but COT data can be helpful, very helpful. Interpreting it is one thing, and then getting positioned because of it is another. No. EP candidates occur on stocks that are neglected, not on stocks that are in uptrends. Episodic pivots is a term that Pradeep coined that is really meant for stocks that are coming out of a period of big time neglect. So, Gal, when you use the word EP candidate, no, it's not reserved for a stock that has been neglected or that has already made 100% plus move. Like when you look at Roblox, the stock hasn't been neglected. It's been vertical. So, this thing gapping up to 148, I'm not coming in to buy this thing at 148 when it's already extended. I wouldn't have bought it in this consolidation because it was extended from the 50. Now, I'm definitely not buying it at 150, right? That's just not happening. APLD's not neglected either. This thing just made a huge move. And why is it gapping up? It's gapping up, on some pretty decent earnings. I mean, it's just an earnings gap up play. It's not some neglected name. But yeah, I don't look at Roblox or Carvana as EP setups because Carvana's far from neglected. The thing has gone from $3 to $400. That's not neglected. It's been the best mover for the last 2 years. Yeah, I don't know. That Quantum had insane news yesterday. Microsoft said something about it. But I didn't view that news as something super positive for these individual companies. Something positive for the group, but my thoughts on NRG. Yeah, just choppy. Pretty sure this thing has earnings soon, so just be thoughtful of that. Yeah, it's got earnings in next week. It looks like. So, do you really feel like you got to buy a new stock? We're in the midst of earnings season. So I think the best thing to do is pay attention to the names that are reacting well to earnings and then holding up and, giving you high volume closes, clean gap ups, not giving up their moves on earnings, building ranges, and then, giving you the old, if anybody's familiar with Scotland, giving you the old fishhook setups, like know what you like to trade, but you don't have to buy anything just 3, 4, and 5 days before earnings. I think, you can go without it and do just fine. Would I sell if I had Roblox? I might trim. If I had Roblox from like $70, I would just be trimming. I want to give a stock as much opportunity as I can to work, right? I don't just want to sell it just to sell it. I wouldn't think about the Dow Jones. It's 30 stocks. The Dow doesn't matter. The Dow does not matter. What else doesn't matter is Peloton. Peloton doesn't matter either. Let this thing, do more work. Let this thing, get into a clean little uptrend, and then this was actually a pretty nice digestion right here. But yeah, nice volume yesterday, I guess. I don't know what to make of it. Was there news or something with Peloton? Morning, no. It depends. When I buy something, if I have, it's a great question. So if something's like 2 weeks out from earnings or even 10 days, I'll buy it. If it pushes for 3 to 5 days prior to earnings, I'll take some off, a little bit off the table, and then I'll just let the rest work. And then obviously if it gaps up and goes on to work from there, fantastic. But yeah, that's only, I don't, that's actually a great question. I don't know. That's not really something that happens to me too often. I mean, like CCL, for instance, I'm just kind of holding it and going to hold it through earnings because I've got a cushion. Oklo, I'm just kind of holding, and I know that their earnings will be, pretty much nothing. So it just depends how much cushion you have and how much of something you've already trimmed. Like I'm all trimmed up on Oklo. There's nothing left for me to do. It could drop back to my average. And yeah, that would suck. It could gap down on earnings to my average and I wouldn't feel any kind of way at all. Yeah, I like Unity. I like what it's been doing lately. This thing actually looks pretty dang good, to be honest with you. I'm assuming they also have earnings soon. We're in like literally the middle of earnings season. Yeah, also earnings next week. So don't be in a hurry to own a bunch of these names prior to their earnings. Let them get to their earnings, let them report, and then you figure out, what the hell is what from there. But Unity does look pretty good. Did I get stopped out of my shorts this morning? What would I have gotten stopped out of? I didn't get stopped out of anything. My stop on Joby is 1850s. I've got a 1750. My stop on Rigetti is 16. We're completely fine. I mean, small little blip up. I mean, it is what it is. And SoFi, I trimmed off half yesterday. Right? There's literally nothing left for me to do. And I trimmed this thing off perfectly right in here. So, yeah, no, I didn't get stopped out of anything. Dollar's still trying to go higher. Bitcoin, man, about as tight as can be. I look back on Bitcoin, it's just like running through the daily chart yesterday again. And I've never seen a high type flag like this on Bitcoin. The only one I could find was in 2022, I believe, or 2023, right in here. Right? You had your move up, and then you had just this little period of digestion here. And this was about the only high type flag where I just saw price trading super tight Otherwise, it's done it a few other times. This is a little bit more sloppy in here, but same deal. Very rarely does Bitcoin trade in such a tight, narrow range for as many weeks as it has up here. I mean, this is about as high type flag as a high type flag can get. Would you play Bitcoin with IBIT or coin? I already own IBIT, so I would just look to add to that. I think you would treat kind of coin as its own position, its own separate thing, because it's running on some stable coin news, something unrelated. What was my idea with SoFi? It gave me a failed to follow through setup and then started to act heavy. And you could just see it on level 2. Any little move higher was just kept getting stuffed and stuffed and stuffed. And, could it have been because me and a million other people were shorting it, and me and a bunch of other people, some people were getting rid of some of their long? I think it's possible. Could it be because, somebody knew an offering was coming? I think that's possible too. And it just kept acting heavy. And then obviously you had the offering news and after hours. So it just got wildly extended, and it wasn't really on my radar until the gap up. Same way, like, it was on my radar because I tried going long on it, like $14. But, once something makes a super massive move, and then it's good to remember, the market's kind of extended here. If the market begins to pull back, I thought anything that had gotten wildly extended, would start to have some pullbacks just naturally, and without being bearish. I'm not really bearish SoFi. I just viewed it as a trade, and it ended up being a nice trade. I mean, I wish, or I still hope it fades a little lower, but it was a pretty giant win by the time we got to overnight. So I don't know. Roblox will be on my radar too as a potential failure today. Not a failure, but just some natural give back, right? There's got to be some. There doesn't have to be anything, but part of my brain goes, maybe there's some profit takers in a Roblox today. Well, if there's some profit takers in Roblox, it'll show up on the tape. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm not bearish. Names that are very, very strong. I could have chosen BitX. Yeah, I was asked about this a handful of times. Why not? Why not BitX? I think it's fine. It obviously moves a bit faster, but I just don't know that I care for leverage products as much. If I had a little less capital to work with, then I would say leverage products are fine. You want things that move a little bit faster, but I've got plenty of buying power right now, so I was able to just size up an IBIT a little bit more, and yeah, that's it really. Morning, Ken. Wolf basing on low volume. Let's take a peek. Yeah, there's not. Wolf looks a little like Bitcoin. So, Bitcoin's got to get going. Iron, a little bit nastier since they had the failed breakout, rolled over just a little bit. Hut, Riot, Mara. Mara had quote unquote good earnings and gave up the entire move and went right on the day. So, Market doesn't give a shit about Mara's earnings clearly. Will it go higher? Maybe, but I like Transmedics. I like the story more than I like the story on the name. Really nice gap up. We'll see what happens if this thing can get and stay over the 50 simple moving average and do it on some pretty heavy volume overnight, or today, then maybe we can consider it a high volume close into tomorrow. Yeah. A lot of the setups that I've traded, you just see them visually on the chart, and it's not so much. Here's the thing: when you're building your playbook, you have to ask yourself, like, okay, you've got earnings gap ups, right? That's a setup that everybody should be familiar with. You've got high volume closes. That's a setup people should be familiar with. You've got flat base breakouts. That's a setup everybody should be familiar with. You got high type flags. That's a setup everybody should be familiar with. Now you go a little bit further. You've got undercut and rallies. That one people aren't as familiar with. You've got moving average undercut and rallies. That's another one people aren't as familiar with. So you've got these setups, and then the question then becomes, when do those setups work best? Is there a group and a time in which those work best? Meaning, certain market situations, like earnings gap ups just aren't working. And learning to recognize that, I think, is very important in real time, because if you don't recognize it and you continue to buy earnings gap ups and they keep failing, you're going to just think that they don't work. So, but there is a time that they work. So, kind of being able to pick in real time and notice it, that it's working or not working, or it's better to wait for the high volume close, or, we're getting a little stretched. So for the last month and a half, I've been saying, pullbacks to ascending moving averages. So moving average undercut and rallies are even better. So, kind of having that awareness in real time as to what would be the better setup to be trading in that moment. If you're going to like middle of April and early May, well then, understanding earnings gap ups, flat base breakouts, high tight flags, which there weren't really any because the market hadn't developed any, but flat base breakouts, undercut and rallies, moving average undercut and rallies were all much better. And like when I was looking at Netflix, or even Hood was at 35, Netflix was at 850. So recognizing those in real time, and I had Netflix on the watch list at $850. So 854, I believe it was. And it was like just knowing the setup that you want to trade and the environment in which you're coming from. Right now that the market has gotten, a little bit, I don't want to say long in the tooth, but we've gone up quite a bit, recognizing, right now we either are going to have high type flags and we're going to get continuation from there, or really the best place to probably buy stocks if we're going to continue higher is you would have an expectation that these moving averages will continue to show up as support, or prior levels of resistance can show up as support. So these undercut and rallies, moving average undercut and rallies are the setups to trade. So you just have to have your playbook, which again, some people talk about setup, and that is the setup, quote unquote, in the traditional sense, but understanding when they work and how they work and the environment in which they work in is the situational awareness part, and that's a whole lot better. So that's the much more important part. ZWS high volume close. Yeah, I mean, it could be. Pollution and treatment controls. You know, the only problem with ZWS, dude, is it moves too slow. Is this really, I mean, industrials have been acting pretty dang well for, where are industrials on my list here for 1 month? Yeah, I mean, I like it. I don't love it. It moves too slow, dude. Pollution and treatment controls just moves too slow. Do I like Galaxy? I like Galaxy like a few weeks ago, right in here. Here, I don't like it as much. It needs to retighten for me to buy it. Could it just keep going? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, Coursera could be a high volume close setup too. 1237. Yeah, NEGG. I think it's just got a high short interest is why this thing is working so well, but not one I'll trade. A little too volatile for me. FTAI, super move yesterday. Yeah, this one could also go on to work from here. 144.46. A moving average undercut and rally. Yeah, I enter as the moving average is being reclaimed. Correct. And then I'll risk off of that low on the intraday. That's where studying comes in, right? That's also like, you want to know what the context of the time is are you watching what's going on with all the other stocks in the market? Like if you were to be like, I like flat-based breakouts. Okay, well, that's fine. But are you seeing other flat-based, because you're not going to catch every stock in the market. So you just get that out of your head right now. So the question becomes, when you see a nice flat-based breakout, have you noticed other flat-based breakouts working? When you see a high-type flag, have you noticed other high-type flags working? When you see a nice, a stock bounce cleanly at a rising moving average and it just maybe undercut it by a little bit and then rallied right back through, are you noticing that that's what's happening in the market with other stocks, right? And you're not going to catch them all. There's going to be a lot of stocks that you miss. So, but are you recognizing that that's what's taking place in the market? And if that's what you're recognizing and you're seeing it in real time with other stocks that you don't own, right, that's added conviction that when you do go to do that, that's the right thing to do. So again, you've got your playbook of potential entries, but then the question becomes, how do you know it's the right thing to do? Well, one, you really don't, and you still have to manage risk in real time. But the way you do is you've seen other stocks do it as well. Strata, yeah, very simple, man. Could I explain to you why low ADR stocks are not ideal if we go by R multiple? Because you're not moving, unless you're trading with $10, $20 million, maybe more, then yes, you can go with low ADR stocks. I trade some low ADR stocks sometimes, right? I own IBIT, I own ARK, those are a little bit slower. But unless you're trading with a shitload of money, right? Because for me, if I'm trading a low ADR stock, but I can just size it up a little bit, I'm still making meaningful money in the real world. But if you're trying to grow like a 100K account, it's like turtle speed, dude. You're not moving really the needle on your portfolio. And it's not like even myself, when I trade a low ADR name, I'm not moving the needle on my portfolio. I'm still making a ton of real world money. But if you're trading a low ADR stock with a 100K account, you're just not going to make a bunch of money, right? The thing that you go and spend on dinner dates and pay your mortgage and pay your everything, your life, right? So that's the important part. That's why you don't want low ADR stocks if you're trying to grow a portfolio. I mean, for me, if I make 10% on my portfolio every year, which I do more than that, but if I did 10%, I'm going to make a ton of money in the real world. And that's all that I care about so that I can maintain my lifestyle. But if you have a 100K account and you did 10%, 10 grand doesn't pay for shit, right? I mean, that's like a half a month of my expenses. But so you see the difference? That's why low ADR doesn't work for people who are trying to build a portfolio. If you're trading with $20 million and you're going to make 10 or 20% or 30% on the year, that's going to be a shitload of money in the real world. But you have to have a bigger portfolio at first. And the way that you get there is, you trade stocks that move a little bit quicker, and that's how you do it. But again, there becomes a time when you're dealing with liquidity issues, and you need to be trading stocks that are a little bit more liquid, and sometimes those names are also a little bit slower. ASPI, yeah, let it tighten up a little bit more. It's just not that clean. A little wide and loose in here. Like, I don't really see a super tight spot. This looked a little bit better for like an ASPI when it got nice and tight up against these moving averages. But right up here, it's a little loose. Could it go on to work? Maybe. CLS is such a monster, dude. I'm such a effing bum for CLS, man. I had 8,000 shares at $100. God, this one hurts. And I sold it far too early. Oh my goodness, dude. 7-figure trade, walked right out the door. APLD. Yeah, nice to see. The higher, the better. App 11's just too choppy. This is just way too choppy. I don't have a setup for this. I don't have a way to get into this thing comfortably, so just been leaving it alone. Sezzle's looking better, Dave's looking better, but both of these two names have earnings coming up soon. So Sezzle has earnings on the 7th, so next week, and Dave has earnings on the 6th next week. So yeah, just leaving those alone for now. Again, we are in the smack dab center of earnings season. You do not have to rush yourself into anything. You just don't. I know people want to get into stuff because they see stuff flying, but don't just be out there guessing as to what's going to go higher and what's not. Bristol Myers, what's going on here? Bad earnings. Already in a downtrend. Oh my goodness, what the hell? Yeah, it does matter because even though it's Bitcoin, Bitcoin, it's just not moving that fast. It's moving about 2% per day, roughly, IBIT. So, it doesn't get me excited, but I own still enough that, it doesn't really matter to me. I can just hold it. It's trending above the 20 for now. Nothing really left for me to do with it. Yeah, Carvana is the 8th wonder of the world. No, I don't use StockFetcher. I've never even heard of that before. Yeah, Zscaler's looking a whole lot better. When's Zscaler earnings? Anybody know when Zscaler earnings are? I mean, it doesn't look too bad. We'll see what this thing does if it can get over this 293.60 level. Create a little alert there. Texas Roadhouse, TXRH. Yeah, this looks like a nice little bull flag here, honestly. This period here reminds me a little bit of here. Similar, except this base was a little bit more flat. But yeah, I mean, it looks pretty damn good. I don't know that I want to own Texas Roadhouse because of how slow it moves. I personally like Shake Shack more. And, of course, Shake Shack's down on earnings. We'll see if Shake Shack gets bought up. September 4th. Okay, so you've got some time on Shake Shack. September 4th. We got some time. Yeah, snow's another one. Very slow. What screener do I use for my charts? I've got a lot of scans. I typed in slow instead of snow. I've got a few scans, man. I've got a few. I don't really know how to answer that. I've got a 3-month relative strength scan. I got a, relative volume scan. I got a gap up scan. I got a gap down scan. I got an earnings scan. I've got my already put together watch list from the night before. I've got a news feed with a squawk, so I kind of can hear the news as things maybe are developing throughout the day. Yeah, man, I got a lot. I got all sorts of stuff. Well, Meta with a bunch of price target increases. Not surprised there. Yeah, DraftKings also looks pretty good. This one's on last night's watch list video. Hard to chase, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how many profit takers there may or may not be in the morning. IESC? What? IESC. No, this is not a setup. When you look at IESC, what do you see? How do you get into this thing and manage risk? Like when you look at IESC, where exactly do you look at this and go, oh yeah, that's nice and tight. I can buy this. You think about it like this. Let me give you a good metaphor. Stocks on the way up are like moving trains. What happens if you try to step onto a moving train? You can get killed, right? When do you step onto the train? When it has come and pulled into the station. In other words, it's a bullet train. You try to hop on, you're going to end up getting murdered, right? But if you wait for it to stop at the station and then start to take off again, you can hop on that train as it's just starting to pick up speed and leave the station again, right? Now, think about a consolidation, that sideways period like IBIT, as the stock having pulled into the station. It's no longer flying. It's no longer a bullet train, right? And the stock is completely at a standstill. In other words, the train is stopped at the station. How do you really want to buy it when it's stopped at the station, assuming that the train is going to get going again? Or do you want to try to hop on that train as it's just starting to pick up momentum again? And it's just, going 5 or 6 miles an hour. In other words, you're trying to get onto IBIT if you don't own it as it's starting to break out, right? As it's just starting to break out again and starting to potentially pick up speed. But this is a train that is in motion that takes pauses, and then it's in motion and then takes pauses, and then in motion and then takes pauses, right? That pause is how you end up limiting risk. So you can try to hop on the train and not kill yourself when it's going 200 miles an hour. When you look at IESC, right, it's in motion. In fact, it's vertical. So how the hell do you get into it without killing yourself? GEV is another one of those. It's in motion. You can't, it's in motion, but you have to wait for it to stop at the station. If you don't wait for it to stop at the station, you're going to go to hop on the train and it's going to shake you off and it's going to look ugly and it's going to hurt really bad. CEG was nice yesterday. If you were paying attention, CEG was really nice yesterday. In fact, it's been nicer on these pullbacks to ascending moving averages. Guys, you could look at a name like CEG. They come into their 50-day and they hold perfectly. Look at a name like Toast. They come into their 50-day and they hold perfectly. You look at a name like A-Lab. It came into its 200-day and it held perfectly. If you're not paying attention to ascending moving averages, you're just kind of sleeping in this environment, right? That's what the rule has been. Pay attention to stocks against their ascending moving averages. How many days do you use for ATR 20? Is that the question? Yes, it's 20 days. A month of price action. A month of price action and 1 week of price action. If I'm looking at 5-day. What do I think of? I'm not going to answer all of these, MLR. I love you, but you're putting me to work, brother. Symbiosis is probably my favorite of the bunch, but again, you need to let the train stop at the station, right? Move up and it's starting to stop at the station now, right? The train is refueling and it's going sideways, completely healthy, a little bit extended from the 50 simple moving average, so I couldn't buy this thing, right? It's about 6 times its average true range from the 50, so a little bit extended. I'll answer a few more. BZAI, you're asking me to look at a small cap turd. Please don't ask me to look at these, dude. I'm not gonna look at more if these are the names you're asking me to pull up. TDTH, kind of hot garbage. SY, hot trash. PSIX, a whole lot better, but very extended, super extended. But please don't be looking at trash like BZAI, dude. It's garbage. I already knew about that name. Hot trash. Don't do that to yourself. Symbiosis, probably one of the leading robotics names out there. These other ones, you're looking at too many small caps, man. Too many. Neo. I'm good on Neo, dude. Look at the Neo daily. Where's the momentum? Right? Hasn't Neo had moments like this before and then just given it all back? Hasn't Neo had moments where it's like this before and then given it all back? How many times does Neo got to do this? Like, let Neo actually go into a real uptrend for a while. Like, don't own it. Forget about it for like the next 4 months, right? If a stock is really going to trend higher, it's not just for 4 months. It's for a year plus, 2 years, 3 years, something. A whole lot better. This crap with Neo, let it prove to you that it's under like real institutional accumulation and not just like such a cheap stock. You see the volume come in, you're like, oh my God, it's being accumulated. Yeah, it's so cheap, right? And it has a short float and all sorts of shit. Like, just leave Neo alone. Besides, this isn't even the best one of all the EVs out there. Like, Lee is better. XPEV is better. XPEV's been better. This is like, now you're getting into a chart that nice move up, big base, another real second leg, building a whole new base, right? Now you're talking a whole lot better. Yeah, AGX is awesome. Dude, I should have rebought this thing through the flat pivot, but it's just trading a little funky. It's just trading a little funky. Right? Nasty kill bar, but then just started to hold on to the 50, and nice tight day as it reclaimed the 50 day. Right here was probably the best spot, 208, but I didn't buy it, and I didn't want to, try and buy it through this little pivot on 725. Yeah, Affirm looks all right. So does Upstart. Affirm looks pretty good. Yeah, Symbiosis MLR is probably my favorite of the bunch. An actual company. Yeah, I like AOI. I'm watching it today as a 200 simple moving average undercut and rally. Right? You bounced right at the 50-day yesterday, and then maybe you start to rally from there. But again, you got this huge gap up going on in the market. I'm just going to sit for like the first 15 to 20 minutes and see if, what starts to happen out there, right? I want to know if there's going to be some profit takers, or, does the market just, sell off? Who knows? So I don't really know what the hell's going to happen. I could see it going either way. I could see it being this like gap and then you just grind all day long, or I can see it being like this gap and then you just got profit takers all day long into this, move. So I don't know. But we'll take it, one minute at a time, I guess. No, I don't like Palantir. I don't like, it's been too choppy. And the 50 simple moving average, it hasn't really caught up yet. Just no good. Like, how do I buy Palantir here? Can't do it. General Electric, too slow. Dude, the first place I noticed, yeah, this is far too slow. And there's no setup here. And it's also too extended from the 50. The first place I noticed General Electric was down here. How crazy is that? $55. Had I only known. Yeah, Rocket Lab looked really good yesterday. Yeah, my daily dollar volume criteria, I don't buy stocks that are trading, less than 60 million bucks a day, roughly. Sometimes, a little bit less if the stock moves a bit faster and I can just size it down. But, the reality is I need 60, $100 million plus. I mean, I don't really want to be trading names that are too thin. Yeah, I don't want to buy CoreWeave though. I mean, CoreWeave's just been a straight washout for the last handful of days. It needs to build me a higher low on the daily. Yeah, GE's also too slow. Brian, don't be mad. Yeah, don't be mad. I do think Upstart needs a little bit more sideways. The casino names Win and LVS have been my favorite. No, I'll leave Cyber alone. It's a buyout play. That's not a name that I want to own. They're going to be bought out by PanW, which would then mean that they're not going to be trading on the market anymore. I'm not sure how that's going to work. Crowd, it's been a laggard for a little bit, kind of hanging out below the 50-day. This isn't the name that I want to own. If you can't reclaim the 50-day, I don't want to own it. So. No, I'm not going to mess around with FIG. And everybody, I got to get going. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow for our Friday. And you guys trade them well today. Please don't do anything crazy. Music, you should see a link on my X page or even on my YouTube. But I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow. Same time as always, 7:30 Central. Trade them well today. Stay safe.